Okay, I'm going to demonstrate the final parts 4, 5, and 6 of the Bent Creek project today. I won't go in incredible depth with some parts of it, but I'll cover as much of it as I can. In parts 1, 2, and 3, parts 1, you built your project database and directory structure, started organizing some existing data and content. You created some points from X, Y coordinates. And you actually geo-referenced a JPEG USGS trail map so that now we have our scanned Forest Service trail map in the background. We've also got some vector data like roads, Bent Creek openings, and streams. I'm going to change the color of streams just a little bit, and I'm going to make the trails a color that I can see better. If you remember, for the trails layer, we created a trails feature class. We added some domains to that trails feature class to enable us to more easily, quickly, and accurately enter attribute values while we create the trails data. And so essentially we've got this empty trails feature class here with nothing in it, but it's got some attributes ready to be added. So what I'm going to do is jump to the exercise a little bit and talk about the trails we're going to create. And in the exercise, the first thing it tells you is to digitize the following trails. And the first one it requests is number 666 up to 660 and then to the end. So 666 comes off of this little road here and goes all the way up to this road up here. So what the instructions request is that you digitize up 666, but then when it hits 660, you cut across this way. So it's two trails. One trail is Wolf Branch. 666 is Wolf Branch. And then if you look at the trail map, and this is just the JPEG of the trail map, we're concerned with this table right here, which will help us to gather the attributes we need for this map. And you can print it off if you want, but it goes up 666, which is Wolf Branch, up until it hits 660, which is Ledford. It gives you some mileage and some rating, the blaze, which we didn't say we were going to put in our table, and the use. So both of these trails are hike, bike, horse trails. And so let's start editing and see what happens here. My editor toolbar is here, and my interface will look slightly different than yours. But I'm going to start editing. Since all of my data is loaded out of the same database, it doesn't ask us what database or folder we want to edit in, but it does have something different going on with the spatial reference for this data. This is a student's data, so I didn't check it. But if I look, generally you don't want to digitize data that is projected on the fly. This trails data should have been created in the same projection as the other data, which it was not. It's being stored in WGS84 and it's being projected on the fly. So we're just going to let that go for now. Yours should have been created in state plane, is what the instructions requested. So you won't see that error. So if by chance your create features dialog doesn't come up here, then you can go to the editor drop down in editing windows, and you can go to create features, and that'll give you this create features window. We also have our attributes window here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to trails, and I'm going to start by snapping to that road, and you can zoom in if you need, because that trail connects to that road. And I'm just going to start digitizing up this trail. I'm going to zoom out a little bit. I'm left clicking every time I want to put a vertex in. And in this case, since 660 ends and 660 starts, I could stop this feature and go on and enter the attributes into it. But since some of the attributes are going to be the same, they're both hike, bike trails, I'm going to go on and create this whole trail. Notice it's snapping to the line, the stream there. I'm going to Control Z and undo that. And to stop it from snapping in real time while I'm digitizing, If you hold down the space bar, it will stop snapping. That's a nice quick little way to disable snapping. But I do want to snap to that road there, that vector road right there. So I'm going to double click that. And I've got this new line that I've entered in. Now, if I look at the attributes for that line here, since the trail use doesn't have the right, the trail use should have hike, bike, or hike by course. The student did not do that properly either. So what I'm going to do for this one is call the whole trail medium difficulty, and then I'm going to split the trail in half using the split tool. So what I was trying to do there is make the whole trail a hike bike trail, and then when I split it in half, the two new trails would both get those attributes. It would duplicate those attributes across both of them. In this case, it'll duplicate this trail use. So I'm going to split it with the trail selected. I use my split tool to split it right there. So now I can select that trail and I can give it a name of Wolf Branch. And I can give it a trail number of 666 and a trail rating of medium. Now I'm going to use my edit tool on my editor toolbar to select the other trail, and I'm going to tell it that it's Ledford. It's trail 660 and it's also medium. Now yours, you'll have trail use of hike, bike, or hike by course. The student applied the wrong domain. So there you can see I've got my data being entered in, and we'll just continue to add it along. Now be careful making selections when you're in an edit session like this, because you've got this polygon boundary that covers the whole area, and if you're not careful, you can select that boundary when you're trying to select a trail, and it's really easy to move something like that. See how I just moved that? So I'm going to hit Control Z twice to undo that move, because I didn't mean to do that. And I want to show you a nice trick when you're editing. Under the editor options, you can turn on something called sticky move tolerance. I usually put mine to about 50 pixels. And what that does is it stops you from moving a feature by accident. So this feature, I can't move by accident there. All right. So let's move right along and put in another trail. So now when I select that polygon and I move, it doesn't move. See that? Unless it goes 50 pixels and then it jumps over there. So it essentially stops you from moving things by accident. And if you were zoomed in really close and wanted to move a feature a small amount, you'd have to change that sticky move tolerance. But it's a good setting to keep you from moving things by accident and inadvertently. The other thing that's worth doing while you're editing, if you know you're not going to need to select that boundary polygon, it's always smart to come in under the selection view here, list by selection, and you can clear selected features, and you can also make it where features are not selectable at all. I'm going to click to toggle this off. So now I can't select that boundary at all. So because of the nature of how GIS layers all overlay on each other, sometimes it gets hard to choose one without selecting other things. So you can come in here and turn off whether features are selectable or not. All right, so I'm going to stop editing here real quick. Before I do that, I want to make sure you understand you have to save edits separately than saving your map document. And I'm going to jump over here to my geodatabase, and I'm going to see if I can make a quick change to this geodatabase. It's in my downloads folder in Bent Creek. So if I look at my database, they have a trail use domain under the properties of the database, but they did not apply that properly to this trails feature class. So trail use, instead of having a trail rating domain, it should have had a trail use domain. So we're going to go back in here now and start editing again that I fixed that problem so we can see this a little bit better here. Now, so that trail, if I look at the attributes, I'm editing. I want to look at the attributes for that trail. And I want the rating to be hike bike, and this rating to be, or use to be hike bike. I just changed the wrong thing again. This demo is going great. Let's stop editing there. You'll get to see this one more time under my feature class name. Trail rating, trail use should be trail use, and trail rating should be trail rating. Okay, now let's start editing again. This is controlling those domains or drop-down lists that should make your data entry. Trail use, hike bike, trail rating, 666, trail rating on that trail is easy. And on Ledford, it's also easy. Alright, so hike bike, easy. Hike bike, easy. Okay, so you can go in and you can update the attributes as you enter the data in. Another thing you may consider doing, and it's actually kind of a recommended best practice here, I just lost my window there, is that you could symbolize your data based on that field of use and add all the values. And so now when I enter in a trail, I can enter one in that's hike or hike bike or hike bike horse. It allows you to more finely enter the data in. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to choose hike, and I'm going to choose a dashed line, like maybe that. Let's do the -66, make it 1. Hike trails are black only. Hike bike, I'll pick that same -66, I'll make them blue. And hike bike horse, I'll make that and make it a red. So now they kind of resemble the symbology from the map that we're putting them in for. So it makes them a little bit harder to see. As you can tell, you can't see that blue because it's right on top. But it does at least make it a little bit easier to understand what you're putting in. So now that takes us back over here to our create features window here. If you remember from our editing discussion, we said that your feature template in here stores the symbology of your data from the first time you create the edit session and the templates. So my trails aren't being displayed in here with these symbols. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to my feature templates and I'm going to organize them, and I'm going to go delete that trails one, and then I'm going to make a new template for it since I have some new symbology, and that way I can go in and I can enter in a specific kind of trail when I enter it in. So that's really kind of a best practice when you're editing. Go in and symbolize things you want the way you want them, and then start editing. All right, so let's move right on. Now it says to go to trail 145. So let's digitize trail 145. Looks like 145 comes all the way across here. That must be Side Hill probably. 145 is Side Hill Trail. And so I'm going to digitize this trail. Now, Side Hill Trail, out there in the trail, in the woods, Side Hill comes along the slope of this hill, and then it follows this road for a minute, and then it cuts back off this way. And the trail on the ground actually follows that road. So what we're going to do this time is use a technique where we can trace this line so that they're the same thing in the database, because they're the same thing on the ground out there. So let's start digitizing hike, bike, horse trail. I'm going to snap there, and then I'm going to hold shift down to try not to snap to anything. Now, I'm not going to do a really accurate job, and how good a job you do depends on how much time, money, and the need. But I'm going to click on that trail, that road, zoom in. I'm going to switch on. I'm right in the middle of creating this trail, and I'm going to switch to trace. I'm going to click there and watch it traces right down that road to there. And then I'm going to switch back to this, and I'll start drawing my line segments again. You could also switch to a curve tool in real time and play with that and see how that works some. If you want to try and do more curved lines, you can play with that tool as well, or just do your straight line segment. It depends on what you're doing, your needs, your requirements. So when this comes across here, yeah, I'm not doing a great job, but just in an interest of time, it comes in selected, and now that trail's automatically classified as hike, bike, horse. We know it's called Side Hill. It's trail 145, and it is easy. Okay, so the next trail is 666 or 665. That's this one. I'm going to do it really quickly just to put it in here, and I'm not going to enter in the attributes for all these. I wanted to show you a couple over here. 337, the northern portion only. So 337 is part of the Explorer loop, and the northern portion only goes from here up to somewhere around in here. It's actually this loop right in here. The northern portion of it is pretty much this. And now, I'm not so concerned with you getting this exactly right. If you do a slightly different segment by accident, that's not something I'm going to count off for. This is intended to have you digitize certain segments of trails without having to digitize them all. The first few years we did this assignment, we had students digitize everything. But this time, we're just doing 337 that point. And then it says go 336 from Lake Powhatan. So 336 from Lake Powhatan. It says come all the way up to 337, merge on 337, and then split off to 339. It's supposed to have you come through and get this part up to the Parkway done. Okay, all the way up 339 to the Parkway. So I just digitized that whole thing in, but some things change here and there. Like this is 336, this is 337, and then this is 339. The type changes, the use changes. So if you digitize one big long line in there, I'm going to now, let's reshape that a little bit. So there's a reshape tool. If I choose reshape, I can then make this fit a little bit better. Okay, so I changed that. Now I'm going to split that line here, because this line, and I was actually putting in hike, bike, horse. I should have been putting in hike, bike. The trail rating, easy. The trail number, that one's 336. And that's, what is that? Pine something or another. Pine Tree Loop. Okay, so that is the Pine Tree Loop. Now this one is also needs to be split here because the trail use changes as well as the trail. That is hike, bike. And it's part of Explorer. So I'll let y'all get all that in correctly, and I'll just change this type to hike, bike, or just hike. Alright, so make sure to enter in all your attributes correctly. Editor, save edits, editor, stop editing. Okay, so that's pretty close to what y'all were supposed to be editing and working with for the data creation part of this. All right. So the next part, part 5, is doing some geoprocessing and analysis. And so if you can imagine, what we're looking for is, it's a hypothetical kind of question. We're concerned about water quality in the streams out there. And we know that the roads close to streams cause more sediment and runoff into the streams, right? So we want to know how many roads are close to streams. We also know trails to a lesser extent, but trails have negative impacts on water quality in streams. So we can use a GIS to look at how close these things are. One part I didn't show you in the editing before we move to the analysis is you're supposed to also, as part of the editing process here, you're supposed to also move these points to where the actual openings are. So let's add a base map here, and let's look at some of these openings just real quick. I should have done this during the editing part. I'm going to turn off these other two while this base map loads. And essentially, these point locations were from wildlife openings. Okay, so the Forest Service, the Wildlife Service, manages parts of our forest for hunting. Okay, and so they do things like make openings, and they plant crops for animals to eat. So it's a wildlife management technique. So imagine someone went out there and they GPS these, and they gave you the coordinates from a low-grade GPS, and you realize some of them were off. So during an edit session, we can do this very thing where we go select these and we move them to where the opening is. Okay, so that's all you're supposed to do with that part. I'm gonna start editing here and move these. So that's really all you're supposed to do is move these to make them fit. And that's something that's, oftentimes we go out with the GPS to record the locations of something. Like I drove around the Green River Game Lands not long ago and GPSed everywhere you could park around it. And when I came back and I overlaid that on a map, based on the scale of my map, I had to kind of tweak those points. I had to move them around just so that the symbols and icons would work better. So a lot of times, even after you GPS data, you come in and you have to adjust the data based on maybe some other information like that. So I'll save those edits. All right, so back to the geoprocessing and analysis. Let's jump back in. I'll turn off that base map. All right, so the first thing that we're going to want to do is to buffer the streams layer 300 feet. And so we've got our streams layer, so let's buffer it. Under the geoprocessing drop-down, or the most common geoprocessing techniques, we'll go buffer our streams, the projected ones clip down to 300 feet. We'll have it be full round, and we want to dissolve all. If we do not dissolve all, we'll have a bunch of little buffers around every segment of stream. We're going to I'm just going to take the default. It's putting it in the proper database here. I ask you to call yours streams underscore buffer 300. So I'll change mine. Streams underscore buffer 300. This is going to create a buffered feature class polygon around my streams and put it in my project database. And there they are. All right. The next thing that is requested is that we intersect the buffer with the roads layer to create a layer of just roads within the streams buffer. Okay, so how could we tell how much of these roads, these black lines, are within this stream's buffer? We could intersect the two. In this case, a clip would also work, but oh, my stream's buffer went away. I'll have to. All right, so we weren't supposed to be editing when I did that, so we're going to redo that. Buffer. And I'll just put a 2. Second time I'm doing this. Input features, Bent Creek streams. feet, dissolve all. All right. Okay, so now, how many of these roads are within that buffer? I could clip them, or we could do an intersect. This time, let's do an intersect. We're going to intersect the Bent Creek Streams buffer with my Bent Creek roads. The output is going to be called buffer 300 roads intersect. Buffer 300 roads intersect. So we know what layer this is that we create. We'll take all the defaults for the rest, and when this finishes, what you'll see, if we make this new layer, let's make it something that's easy to see. Notice it pops up and tells me it worked, like a purple. Purple's not going to work good because of the buffer, actually. Let's make it orange. So, if I turn off this roads layer, make this a little thicker so you can see it, you'll see the roads intersecting the buffer. Now, if I open the attribute table for this, on the very far right, that shape length field is the length of each road segment in coordinate system units. So this data is in state plane feet, so those are in feet. So if I select this little chunk of road right here and how it intersects that buffer, let me not select the buffer, not select the stream. I don't want that buffer to select, so I'm going to turn it off. It's kind of hard for me to be able to select that. I'm still getting something selected. Alright, so you can see these little chunks of line there. So those are roads. If I look here at these values, that road, there's one selected. That is a multi-part line feature, so it's actually one record in the table. That thing is 1,547 feet long. Okay? So, if I asked you how many miles of roads are within 300 feet of a buffer, which I do, you could say, well, there's a total of, let's look at the total shape length here by looking at the statistics of this field. Right-click your shape length field, look at statistics. I need to unselect that record first. It's going to just show me the selected if I don't. The total, the sum of roads in that buffer is 62,369, 62,000 feet. There's 5,280 feet in a mile. So, you can divide the two to get the answer. divided by 5280. It's 11.8 miles within a stream, 11.8 miles of roads within 300 feet of a stream. Okay, so that's a process we go through to try and determine how much of one thing is close to another, and this is one way of doing that. So using a set of geoprocessing of your data, your streams and buffers and intersects to get down to what you're looking for here. Something that's worth a mention right now, this shape length field, that is a system-defined field that the geodatabase uses to keep up with the length of lines in a geodatabase feature class. That is a big advantage to using a geodatabase feature class over a shapefile. So we learned about shapefiles and geodatabases earlier in the semester, and we said how shapefiles are a simple data format. They have been around a lot longer. They don't do as much stuff. Shapefiles don't have a field like this that automatically updates and keeps up with length. You can manually calculate that information in a shapefile, but a geodatabase feature class just calculates that and keeps it up to date all the time. If you split a line in half, it creates a new record and it modifies those values. It keeps up with the length all the time. So that's nice. The other big advantage, of a geodatabase is those drop-down lists we were using, the domains. That seems like a pretty basic, easy, standard thing, and it is, but shapefiles don't support that. So the geodatabase feature classes allow those drop-down lists. So like we've mentioned, if you're working inside of ArcGIS, the geodatabase is a nice native data format that does a lot of cool stuff inside of ArcMap. If you are using data that you know you're going to be looking at, if you knew you were going to throw this trails layer in QGIS or in AutoCAD or some other program, those other programs read shapefiles quicker and more easily than they will geodatabase feature classes. So if you know you're going to be using the data in some other program, it might make sense to work with shapefiles. You can always convert from one to another. All right. Okay, so that's one of the analysis questions you have. You're also going to combine the streams and you're going to combine the roads and the trails together and then clip them down to a buffer around the wildlife openings, I think. And you also look at streams within the 300-foot buffer. So there's two other analyses you look at to try and tell us how much of something is close to another thing. And we use some buffers and intersects and emerge to do that. So look closely at the exercise instructions for those other two types of analyses. The final thing is to create a map showing your Bent Creek project. The map should include the following layers. It should include the boundary, the roads, the streams, the trails, and the openings. And they should all be symbolized so that they're easy to understand. If you want to make the map look even a little bit better, try labeling your trails based on their name or their number, something like that. You commonly see things labeled on maps. We've seen labeling tools this semester, so this is a good opportunity to try to use some of those label tools as well. Now, if you can make the map look close to what a nice finished map looks like, the better, the closer you can, the better. You should also show your streams buffer or the openings buffer. You should consider using things like transparencies for overlapping layers so you can see them both. Use transparencies or hollow fill symbols. You can show the hill shade, maybe show it transparent as well. So hill shades are nice to show. If you put the hill shade on top of everything else, even like your trail map, and then you make your hill shade kind of transparent, 40% transparent, so you can see the rest of the stuff through it, that can provide a nice effect. I mean, in this case, the map that's showing through is not the best, but you could show something like your boundary with a nice forestry green or something like that. And start thinking about things like that to make your map look a little bit better. Finally, you should have a title, a north arrow, legend, scale bar, and the author. Make sure that your map is fits the page the best you can. These little dashed lines you can see on the side here. I switched to layout view where you see your page. These dashed lines that you see are the printer margins. Don't go outside of those. But you do want to make sure to display your map as large as you can on the page. You don't want to do something like that. You want to zoom in on Bent Creek and really maximize it the best you can on the page. Fit it the best you can. And you can just zoom in and out. I'm actually changing the scale, but fit it the best you can in there. And when you're in layout view is when you can insert all these other things like a title. If your insert drop down, if all of these are grayed out, that means that you are likely in data view and not layout view. By default, your legend puts everything in here that's turned on in your table of contents. I don't want the hillshade in there. I've got one too many buffers in there. You can change a lot of things about this, or just take the defaults. There's my legend. Insert a north arrow. Pick the one you like. You want to try to visually balance the information across the page the best you can. You want it to be a nice, aesthetically pleasing, easy to look at map. Here's our scale bar. Pet peeve I have about scale bars, it's so easy to insert a scale bar, and if I change the scale here, the scale bar changes. But notice when I entered that one in, it came in at 1.6 miles. That's a weird decimal place on a scale bar. It's just so the defaults allow you to just place it right in, but you could resize it down to 1 mile. That's something you should really consider doing, and not have some weird decimal place in a scale bar. You could also insert scale text. I usually include a representative fraction. That's a verbal statement of scale. 1 inch equals a certain distance. I usually include a verbal statement of scale and a representative fraction, as well as a scale bar on all my maps. Other text, like that little text right there, by Pete Kennedy. Dates are always nice. That's actually November today. Okay, so that's just kind of a quick and easy look at some of the mapping you may choose to do, but make it your own, please. All right, that's it for the demo.